As we've all learned from Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and our guest has been responsible for some of the most beautiful opera stages in the world.
If you're wondering what an opera set designer has to share about creativity, you're really going to love this episode.
Hey, how about giving us a clue?
Okay, he's an internationally recognized set designer that lives one of the most fascinating creative lives you can imagine.
Hi, everyone. Hope you've been having a wonderfully creative week. I'm Rod Jones, and as you know, we celebrate what people love to do creatively by giving them a voice, and we share with you how you can live a more creative life.
Yes, and I'm Inci Jones. Welcome to Thought Row Podcast. We invite you to subscribe wherever you listen, and we focus on sharing with everyone how they can think, be, and live more creatively with their own passions.
So, Inci, why don't you tell our listeners who we'll be having as our guest?
Okay, our guest today is Leslie Travers, and he's from the UK. And he's an internationally recognized set designer. He's going to share his creative journey with us today.
Another talent from the United Kingdom.
Yes.
I know we want to get to the interview pretty quickly, but how about your quote?
Okay, so following up from your opening line, here it goes. We know what we are, but know not what we may be. And that is by William Shakespeare.
You know, that's the perfect quote to accompany this interview for sure.
It sure is. But let's go on to our interview and hear what Leslie Travers has to say about his creative life.
Hello, Leslie. Welcome to the Thought Row Podcast. And as everybody knows, we celebrate creativity. And you, my friend, are extremely creative, anywhere from set design to millinery and everything in between.
So true. Hi, Leslie. It's so good to have you with us today. And we are so excited to hear about your creative journey.
It's so good to be with you both. I send you warmest wishes from Northampton in Northern Ireland. And it's wonderful to meet you both.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Likewise for you as well. And before we start our interview, we always ask our guests what they had for breakfast. And I know for you, this is kind of the end of the day, so you have to think back to breakfast. What did you have?
I had to think about that in advance because there's a lot of things that have happened today where it's been pretty busy. But I had what is my usual breakfast, which is a hard-boiled egg, toast with butter, 2 cups of tea, and then when I get to my desk and I sit down and I'm about to start work, I have a coffee and that's the day started. But that's my standard breakfast.
That's quite the breakfast.
That is quite the breakfast. And you have all of the different caffeine, so good for you.
Yeah, and the bed.
It gets you going.
Yes, probably too much. But actually, it's sort of...
No, it stimulates your brain.
I find, I'm a nighttime person, yes, and it just gets me going. And, I like to sort of fit my work running. So, the caffeine really helps.
Exactly.
Leslie, well, why don't you tell us where you're originally from and where you grew up?
Yes, well, I'm from the British Isles. I'm from the UK. So if you think about the image of England and Ireland, Scotland, and it's like an old man walking a dog if you look at them on a map. And if Scotland is the head of the old man, I'm from his nape, which is the northeast of England, which is often called the Kingdom of Northumberland. So I'm from a really little small town in that area called Hartlepool, which is a sort of old fishing town. It was somewhere that grew exponentially during the Industrial Revolution with steelworks and mining and industry. And when I was growing up there in the 1970s, obviously the world was changing and those industries were in decline. But it's an amazing place. It's a very beautiful part of the world. there is wild and romantic, both inland and out to sea. And I loved growing up there. I used to go and stand on the shoreline and sort of dream about where I'd travel and what was on the other side of that incredible stretch of water. But that's my roots. I go back every so often and just spend time there and reconnect. But it's a very sort of a place that's incredibly dear to me.
It sounds beautiful. It sounds spiritual, and it sounds like a good place for someone to grow up that ends up being very creative. What was your favorite? What was your favorite childhood memory from there?
Well, apart from trying to stay up on Christmas Eve, and so I could meet Santa. So I'd be listening out for his sleigh bells and the sound of the hooves of the reindeer on the roof. I never ever could stay up that late. I'd always fall asleep about 9 o'clock. In my attempts, I think there was one moment where someone gave me, and I can't remember which aunt or uncle it was, but gave me a wooden box with a slide top, and it had quite simple wooden blocks, like sort of triangles and objects for kids to sort of make whatever they wanted. And that was a toy I absolutely loved. And I started off just piling things up, and then I would look at pictures of things and try and build them with my wooden blocks. So I remember once making the sort of facade of the Parthenon because it was a postcard that was in the house. So I tried to replicate it. I think that's where possibly I started the journey of becoming a designer, because design is
it's interesting. It's very interesting that you say that, because so many boys, maybe more than girls, I don't know that for a fact, but I had a set of blocks and I had a rector set and all that other sort of thing. And I think that's helps you start your abstract thinking and how to put things together, which obviously impacted your career.
Yes.
So that's like your inspiration.
Totally. Is all these moments that actually are connected when you look back, because there's a sort of process going on. It's almost kind of magical, actually, that how, I think they're kind of random moments, but actually when you add them all together, you can see actually how I had this sort of pathway in life. It's sort of, and I think those things are the things that connected with me. I think, within my personality as well. I just love making things.
Well, that's also changed. A one-on-one kind of creative thing you were doing. It was you, your blocks, and your thinking, and then you kept expanding upon it. And what a beautiful thing.
It totally is. I do have a question for you, Leslie. Do you, when you are creating your current creations on stage, etc., do you still feel the same when you're creating as you did when you did with your blocks? Do you
that is such a good question, and that is, I do, because there's a particular feeling, and I think it's quite close to joy. Actually, there's a kind of tingling excitement, because for me it's like these might be blocks, but they also represent the creation of a kind of world, or imagining some other place or experience. It's a way into something, and I have exactly the same feeling, and I have it now even just talking about it, and it just feels like everything else falls away. I feel alive, and I feel within that moment, and I feel it's all about the exploration. I think it must be like sort of people who get on a boat and travel across the sea, and the first time you see land in 7 weeks. It's a really lovely feeling. I have to make things in a very good mood, and if I'm happy and buoyant, and often the work gives me that, actually, which is really, I'm very lucky. Then anything is possible. You can achieve so much more than you can when it's not a good day, when I'm not sort of feeling so buoyant. But that feeling from childhood to now is exactly the same. That has not changed.
Well, the interesting thing about that, it's 3-dimensional. It's multi-dimensional. So you're using all of your senses in creating, which obviously carried into your career. Yeah. But what were you going to say?
Yes.
Right. Well, we've had the opportunity to see some of your visual creations for the stage that you've done most recently. How did you end up pursuing that career? I know that you did the blocks when you were little. Were there things that kind of led you down that path as you grew?
Yes. Yeah. Interestingly, there's one sort of building that was very key in this process, which was my local library. That place where you could go, and I started off in the kids section, which I remember had these lovely little soft seats that you sat in, and there were children's books, and they're very inventive. And then when I got slightly older, when I was about sort of 9, there was a little theatre section just behind that. You could almost reach your arm over the top of the low-level bookcase and pull out those theatre books. And I was like, oh, I can't use the grown-up section yet. But they were I don't know how I gravitated towards them. But there was like a small section of books about how you do a play. And I remember very specifically diagrams that would show you where, for a farce, where you put the doors, where you put the sofa, how of a view through a window. And actually, although I've never really done work that actually looks like that in any way, what it said to me very clearly was that you could, from very simple means, create the feeling of, oh my God, we're looking at someone's life, where they live, or the illusion of that, the sort of, and how you could create that as a sort of, as a designer. At that point, I didn't really understand that was a job for someone to do. I thought maybe it was a collective thing, or maybe somehow it just organically happened. When I got slightly older, and when I was about sort of 12, and at that point I was really passionate about making things and drawing, and working with inks and sort of exploring materials. And I also fell in love with acting and performance, and the fact that someone, through their voice and the way they stand, and could evoke a whole world. They could be a king, they could be whoever, and I fell in love with Shakespeare, and I was lucky to a teacher. I was terribly shy at school, very shy, and a teacher, to help me with my shyness, made me audition for the National Youth Theatre, which is our sort of national company for young performers. And I thought I wouldn't get in. The audition was terrifying, but somehow I got a place, and I started performing with them every summer. I realized at that point that if I was going to be an actor, I'd have to sort of, in some ways, I felt I'd have to put my pencils and my crayons down. And then when I went there one summer, the National Youth Theatre used to have incredible designers who used to come in and design the shows. And I just suddenly saw what they did, and I thought, oh, that's so the job for me. And that was it. That was absolutely it. And I used to follow them around asking lots of questions when I should have been learning my lines. I was in, but that was it. And then I never, it was about, I was 15 at that point, 15, 16. And that was it. I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
Right place, right time, right person,
and then being tuned into what you want to do.
And it was like everything was predestined or preordained for you to move in this direction.
It feels like that. Yes.
There's so many facets of the creative projects that you brought to life, and it might be best if you share with us your creative journey. Now, I know you've been sharing how you kind of got there, but that's everything that you learned along the way. At some point, you had to put into practice, and you actually had to have jobs where you got to express yourself. How did that come about?
Yes. That's a very good question, because students often ask me, how do I start? And in a way, it's there's no clear direction of what you need to do to make sure the work comes in. Jobs are often not advertised. The main thing is that you have to put a lot of research in and find directors your own age. That's what I did, and write to them. And when they don't write to you, you write to them again and be persistent. I was so persistent assistant when in my 20s, where I was very nice, but I kept records of who I'd written to and who I wanted to work with, and I saw things, and if I loved them, so I just kept pushing to sort of try and make something happen, and it's that sort of that persistence eventually sort of paid off, but it was a lot of effort, and there were times which were quite difficult, and I thought, what am I doing? This is crazy. But also I thought, well, I love it, and this is what I'm going to do, and if it's going to be tough for me, then that's going to be my life, but I'm not going to stop doing it. But then eventually, I think because I was open and warm and helpful as a young person, and I sort of started off assisting designers and who were amazing, and I learned so much from them. And I love the fact that I could make their life easier to create the work, and where they could be focused on having the ideas. And I felt it was like an apprenticeship, and I just watched absolutely everything and was involved with everything, and I got very excited and about everything. People remember you when you are open and you have a good disposition. Years later, I've got work in the past 10 years of people who remember me when I was in my early 20s and how I was.
Oh, really?
And how
that's
keen
so
I
wonderful.
was and caring. And I'd walk into difficult situations with a smile on my face. I think that's naivety, but I had and people took me under their wing. An amazing designer called Yolanda Sonnabend became a lifelong friend. She rebuilt me and made me think about things really seriously, and she was so clever, and I felt like I was like an apprentice, like her apprentice, and sort of eventually we started designing things together, which was incredible to do.
I think these people recognized your talent,
absolutely.
But probably more importantly, it was a fine line between tenacity and being a good guy, a good person.
Well, also,
and they probably picked up on that.
Yes.
Also, though, I really get this energy from you, Leslie, of you've got this childlike, I know you said wonderment and optimism that I think is infectious, and people just want to help that along because you don't see that often in people.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're mentoring you in such a great way.
Yeah, really. I've tried cynicism, but I can't wear it for very long. It's something comes along and sort of fills my mind and imagination, and I'm happy with that. And and it was such an interesting time working with different designers and learning how they sort of dealt with the process and how their process was. And actually what was really nice, I thought when I was really young, I saw designers as superheroes, and you'd have to be, you'd have to have an encyclopedic mind, and actually realizing that the humanity of people who do these amazing things, and sort of how worried they get, and they'd get nervous in presentations, and I could see hands shaking, and the worry of budgets, and it just sort of humanized the whole thing. And actually I thought, well, it's worth having a go. I think, I really want to do this job. So wonderful times, really, actually. That was the beginning. And then I started off doing small scale things with directors now, in sort of fringe venues where we had very little budget, and we'd have to, sort of ask for donations for costumes, and ask paint shops for free paint, but we put things together. Interestingly, a lot of those people, some of those directors now are running buildings, running national institutions. Yes. But that's how we started. We'd make things out of nothing, and ingenuity, and that's how we learned so much through having to be economic and make specific choices.
Yes.
There are things that people said to me that. Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, when you were working with these various mentors, and they were teaching you, and you were learning a lot from them.
Yes.
And this might be kind of an unfair question, but did you ever inside think, oh, I could make this so much nicer, but you kind of had to follow their direction?
Yes. Well, you'd make it your way. Sometimes It's interesting, and actually it goes back to Yolanda because, it's very good to know what your limitations are about what you feel through your life experiences. There are things that you like and things that you don't like, and things that attract you and things that repel you. And they might be very different, and they are very different to the person you might be sat next to. So that's a brilliant thing about design. The question might be the same to two people, but the way each of you will answer it will be very different. And there are times where I'd sort of, I'd go, I would have done that differently. Right. But it's easy set on the outside when you're not the one creating the whole vision. And it's about the world that they're creating.
Yeah, I refer to that as...
Sometimes... Yes.
I was going to say, I refer to that as after the fact art directing.
Yeah.
Exactly. It would be so easy. It would be so easy. But it was interesting. But also I was more fascinated and more enamored by how in that sort of difficult situation where someone has all these concerns, budget can come up with a beautiful idea, that cuts through everything.
Well, you have to be
and
creative.
A very good idea.
Yeah, you have to be creative.
Evolution.
But you also have to
the creativity.
But you also have to be on target. You have to make it all come together. You have to orchestrate it. I mean, orchestrating it's a big issue. I don't need to tell you that, Leslie. You know that better.
True.
What were we going to ask, Angie?
Well, speaking of orchestration, I know we were talking about your doing staging earlier, and one of the things that you seem to be greatly noted for is staging operas. And, it looks like you've even staged operas here in the U.S. at the Santa Fe Opera House. Give us an idea of the process from developing a concept all the way to opening night. Yeah.
The very first thing is, the very, very, very first thing is the title of the piece. That's where we start from. Mm-hmm. And when I say we, I work collaboratively with the director. So, and I work with quite a lot of different directors, and process is often different depending on how I like to work with that other person, how they want to work with me. Yeah. But we'll listen to the piece. Yes, I do a lot of opera. I love music because it reaches out at you, and it's almost like having another person who's very boisterous and very informative in the room with you. And I find that so quick. If I'm doing a play, I'll listen to it. It doesn't matter if it's a bad recording. It just brings it more alive. I often find words on a page quite challenging. It reminds me of those difficult moments at school when you have to write those long essays about what something meant. You lose the emotion of the human being saying it to you. But music it just reaches out to me. And so the first thing is just to try and listen to it. Shed all the ideas of, if you're doing a production, say something like the Magic Flute or the Magic Figaro, you want to sort of shed all the other ways that you've seen it been done many times and find the piece for yourself. I often I'll listen and then I'll start to sort of track the people in the story and just sort of ruminate on where they could be and what would be the right place to put them in. Should the space feel comfortable? Should it make them feel vulnerable? Should it sort of change so it moves the story on? And I have those thoughts, but right at the beginning with the director, I like to not get too specific about making it a theatrical machine. It's about the story. It's as if someone said to you, to me and to the director, here's $200 million, make the film you want. And you just go, what could we can do anything. And because I think to be free at the beginning gives you a kind of a broad landscape. And I think my ambition is always to kind of go further than I've been before, or to feel challenged the way I make things. Mm-hmm. But we'll talk about the piece, we'll get excited and we'll find it and I think at the beginning that's such an important part of the process, because it's going to your ideas are going to have to weather so many storms.
Yeah, for sure.
Taking
so
things
true.
into a house, getting the house, all the departments interested in what you're doing, for them to execute the work properly. Once it's in budget and it's possible and it's technically okay, And you have to hold on to those ideas. It's really interesting. And then, what's wonderful about opera is it has so many layers of involvement, where, it's just often it's you on your own, and then there's two of you and the director, then the light designer, the choreographer, perhaps people become involved. So suddenly the team builds, suddenly you're presenting to a whole company, and going through your idea, and often they're watching in silence, and they're not like an audience in an opera house. It's like the worst audience you'll ever get, and you weather that through, and then it's you have to take it apart, and various departments have to make the set, the props, and you have to supervise. Bring people along with you. And I think it's really important that I have to enthuse people. I don't want to feel like we're in a production line making just another opera. I'd like it to be personal, personable, and that we have a good time and we find something together. And then there's that. Yes.
I was just going to say, Les, it's a brilliant answer. And I only want to touch on this lightly because I think I witnessed some of this that you've done. But is it correct that you make miniatures or models of what you intend on doing or what you hope to execute?
Yes.
And then is there an approval process when you create that model? Does everybody stand around and say, oh, I like this, I'm not so sure about that? Will the people be able to work within the confines of the set you've created? Is that all part of the process?
Yeah, I that used to terrify me when I first started because, of course, I have a personality. I think deep down, I want to make people happy and please people, and I'm not doing this just for myself. And actually, those comments I find them, because I'm quite shy, and them sort of, how do I get over that? Now, I think tell me. They're useful. I either go, no, I don't agree, or absolutely. Someone will say something you think, actually, that's a very useful thought. And actually, that's really think about that. And so that process, and generally there's people in that room, they want to make it work. They're not there to destroy it. They want you to produce the best thing you possibly can because it's going in their building.
Yeah, sure.
So they just want to help you and make sure that you can have what you need, and it's informative is the word. Should have got to that quicker, but it's informative of how you move things on. I have a very open process, so I share things as soon as possible. If the director's happy that I'm showing the ideas around, because then people come back with the technical issues. By the time we do a first presentation, so that happens in stages. The first presentation is the sketch idea. By that part of the process, usually we've answered a lot of the technical difficulties that could arise. And so we're much further along. Then it's a question of how the house feel about it. Generally, the notes about whether they like the work or not have been answered earlier on in the process when you've told them about what you're doing, and they've generally put their faith in you because they see something that you're going to bring to it.
You so eloquently presented that, and I have to ask you this: there's so much that goes into set design, but then stages need actors and singers. What is your role in creating the costumes for them?
It's a supportive role, I think, very much. I mean, the best moments in a fitting room for me are when a performer comes in, and it's, often I've done my costume scheme and we've started producing things way before the actor's even there in the rehearsal room, way often before they've had time to really think about who their character is. So there's always a kind of tense moment, I think, where somehow you could, as a designer, could feel too far ahead, and it's difficult for them to comprehend. And also, I don't want it to feel like you're putting something on the character that they can't explore. So it's about meeting their process as a performer, as they discover what the character is. It's about meeting at the right pace and walking it together. I mean, the difference that I have is that I'm not going to worry. I've got this overview of what's happening, so they have to fit that character and who they are within the greater scheme of the world that we're creating. And,
well, one other important
so it's a very
thing,
intricate.
I was just going to say one other very important thing is when you create a costume, especially for an opera, the singer has to be able to move and act and perform when they're wearing that costume. And I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, which you obviously do.
Totally. And also, the people I'm working with, the costume supervisor, the costume makers, these are highly skilled people who do this day in, day out, and to such a high degree. And it's all about looking really intensely and seeing if there are little tweaks they can make that will improve how the costume feels, how it works, how it moves. We spend a lot of time choosing fabrics that we really make sure the fabric moves in the right way for that character. The best moment for me in a fitting room is where, and I feel quite emotional thinking about this, and because when it happens, it's an utter joy, is when someone puts something on and they suddenly own it and it's theirs.
Oh, nice.
And then suddenly you feel, and when the performer says to you, oh my goodness, I found something, I found the character, you've really helped me. And I go, that's what we're there to do.
Oh, how nice.
And that doesn't stop when all the time I'm checking when we have stage rehearsals and the costumes are on, and we're checking whether it feels right, it's moving properly, the performer's comfortable, as well as looking at the set and everything that needs attention in that, the costume it has to be sort of really taken care of.
Well, the costume, along with the actor, the singer, the performer, the costume also has to work with your set, I believe, and it also has to work with the audience. The audience has to be able to embrace it and see it, I guess.
Well,
totally.
It's.
I mean,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm just, one thing that's kind of recurrent through in the work I do is how actually a lot of changes from costume in shows that I've done have happened on stage, which is about transformation. It's like the birth of a butterfly, or because it can show you what someone's intent is. That sort of going from rags and putting on military costume to putting on a gown, or it just so says how their emotion in that moment, in that aria, and that story is changing, and how the world is moving on. And costumes are a very good device for helping do that visually.
Well, I guess they have to change their demeanor, right? The performer has to change their demeanor.
I can honestly tell you that when you see a performance, and someone like you are saying, Leslie, totally is owning the costume and the set, and they can integrate that into their performance or their opera, it's really kind of magical, because when the audience walks away, which is the most important part, when they leave that auditorium or stage, they have the feeling of magic for days after. And that's I think that's where you really shine, where you, when someone leaves that stage, that they really can feel it for days after.
Nicely said.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it's beautifully said.
That's absolutely, that's the best gift. Is when someone afterwards has experienced something way beyond what you've created out of wood and screws and bits of ribbon, and suddenly it sort of opens something in them, and their imagination is engaged, and it just, and they see things that there's that aren't necessarily there literally, but they feel something quite deeply. I think that's the best. I think that's what we're there for. For that kind of engagement, or even just for someone to just have a nice evening and be transported and forget about worries and and hopefully live in the moment. We do our job properly and we stay in the moment and we work really hard. That actually, all the endeavor shouldn't be felt. It should just feel very natural, and it should just feel like riveting, exciting storytelling.
Absolutely.
That's always
I like what you just said. It is a riveting, exciting storytelling where, you're taking someone and transporting them from their day-to-day life.
I like that part. I like what Leslie said about giving a place for somebody to be secure, comfortable, and relaxed, and not dealing with
and
all
taking them away from their lives.
Away from their lives.
Stuff
everybody needs a break, I think.
You know, I have a question for you, Leslie. Are you involved?
Yes.
Are you involved in the lighting at all during the staging of all this? Do you help design now?
Very closely. I work very closely with the lighting designer. I generally have enough on my plate in the production to sort of keep me very busy, but so my relationship with the lighting designer is crucial. People say lighting designers make or break, and it absolutely is. It's got to come through the design. Mm-hmm. It's got to be absolutely within the concept, and it's got to feel completely integrated. I'm very close to the lighting designers I work with. They're like the person I need to spend most time with quite often we do stage rehearsals. Mm-hmm. But I involve them very early in the process, even when my ideas are like, oh, it could be like this or it could be like that. I just want their feedback. I want to hear how they treat that world. I want their work to come in parallel and be very intertwined in what I'm doing. So I don't generally present the work to lighting designers late in the project, so they have to sort of work around what I've created. I think it should be seamless. So, and I'm very opinionated during lighting rehearsals, that I express what I feel and what my response is. But I'm lucky to work with some amazing people who, you know, my jaw often drops and I just have to have a quiet moment because I go, it's way beyond.
Well, you know, some of the sets
into another realm.
Yeah, some of the sets that you've designed are kinetic, so there's a lot of movement on the sets. I think they're incredible. The moving parts, and lighting an object that's moving and still presenting it in the best light, so to speak. That could be kind of tricky. So I can imagine it's important for you because you built that kinetic set, or you understand how it should be interpreted by the audience. I could see that being a critical aspect of what you do, because without lighting, nobody can see what's going on.
That's kind of true.
No. And actually, through what seems as very subtle adjustment, can be emotionally completely opposite. How you could make a character on stage feel swamped by the world around them, and then suddenly, through picking them out and reducing the light around them, suddenly they feel really isolated. And sometimes you can absolutely make them the focus of what you should be looking at. Sometimes stages are very big, and if everyone was lit the same, you go, perhaps who's singing? So there's that subtle thing of helping the eye move around, and it's I suppose it's sort of kind of manipulative, but it's a very clever thing. And I've worked with an amazing lighting designer called Thomas Harsey, who's American. He lives in Cincinnati, and he's brilliant. And I remember once we lit part of Julie Cesare by Handel, and it was literally someone coming down a staircase. It was 4 seconds of action, and it took us 5 hours. Because it had to feel absolutely right, and it just took and when we got it right, it just made the rest of the show so much easier, because it was such a pivotal moment. It was so much time. It's like animators, draw for hours and hours and hours just to do a second, but it takes a long time, a lot of finessing and a lot of going over to get the lights in the right place.
Well, sure, because it's, Leslie, it's live action.
Yeah.
It's not like shooting a movie where you can move the lights and change things.
And redo.
Yeah. This is live action, and if somebody's coming down a staircase, you want them not going into shadows or going into dark, back to light, back to dark. I can imagine that's a real challenge. Speaking of challenges, what has been the most challenging aspect of your career? To me, it all looks very challenging. But what would you consider to be the most challenging aspect of your career?
That's yeah, you're right in one sense, because what I love about this job is it's full of challenges. I've got, as you said, I've got a sort of quite, what I would describe as quite a sunny disposition. I don't dwell on the difficult stuff. I've got enough good stuff going on to kind of make my life possible but the most challenging thing, admin. My tax returns and receipts is my nemesis.
Yes,
absolutely. I do tidy my studio, but I am not the tidiest person in the world. Everyone around me would agree with that, but I do. Actually, so I tidy up when I'm shedding something. So when a project's done and it's handed in, I'll throw those bits I'm holding, those bits of card that might be useful, and just recycle.
Yes.
And move on. But admin is the worst one. That is the challenge, but we have to do it in life. That's and it's good.
All creative.
Everybody out there listening is going, yes, we agree with you, Leslie, 100%.
All creative people.
I love doing my tax. It's so fun. Yeah. And I love, I feel like lucky, like, oh my goodness, I do this job that I love doing, and I pay tax. That's brilliant, isn't it? But it's just the admin side of things. I'm not a natural administrator. I'll be very honest about that.
Angie's got a really interesting question for you, and I'm excited to hear the answer.
I want to know what it's like for you when you do an opera or any stage performance you've worked on, and the audience is seated. It's opening night, and the curtain's going up. What goes on in your mind?
Wow, it is a lot. It is.
Yes.
It is a very powerful, emotional, strange feeling that I've never got used to. I envy people who seem to sort of take on the chin. Maybe they're not telling me the truth, but I find it very exposing and weird. I think the first thing is, I've been at this thing since it was born with this production, and it's been sometimes over a period of a number of years, and it's sort of you end the process having spent weeks in the house getting to know everyone, working really closely, spending all your time together, and suddenly it stops, and then suddenly all these people you don't know, when you're at the point in the process where you've given everything, you're at your tiredest, perhaps could be said most vulnerable, and suddenly all these people walk in from other experiences, and they come and sit down and they're staring at this thing in front of you, and I go, that's sort of torture. It's really weird. It feels. I sometimes don't watch first nights, I have to be honest. Sometimes I sit backstage and watch the machine of the production happening. I did Francesca Darimni at La Scala, and the opening night I was so nervous. It's a scary boo house, anything can happen. Right. It's full of stories about their opening nights, but I sat backstage and I watched, because we say, can that carriage be brought on at that time, and can that piece of scenery move, and then you see all the people who are hidden away, who make that happen, and the instruction and the care, and it always gets me. I go, this is the magic for me. So I get to see that side of it, but also sometimes when I'm watching first nights, it's like watching it in slow motion. It's like nothing's happening. It's like, will you just open that door? Please. What's going on? It's just, I think it's because of adrenaline. But you have to, part of the process, you have to let go of it. I always have a moment before the first night where I might be sat there and there'll be someone singing an aria, and I've got my hands on the process and checking things, and it will just transport me, and I'll fall into the story, and I'll just let go of the piece a little bit. It always makes me quite emotional, because it is, you have to let go of it. You have to let it be. It belongs to other people now. If you've done your job properly, they'll have something they can tour around the world, and it'll be fine. But first nights are so strange. They're very, very odd.
I bet. I bet. When you were just saying about how sometimes you get involved in what you're watching and you forget that you basically built all this. Is that the magic moment when you go, I've done my job because even I am convinced this is real?
That is absolutely it.
Yeah.
Where you just, and it's always, and it's the specific feeling, and it's like saying, oh no, then I'm going to cry if I say it. But it's like saying goodbye to someone you love at an airport. I put it on that level. It's
really, I could see that.
It's that rush. You feel the emotion go through you, and it's where you sort of you're done, and it's its own thing now, and you need to let the people who are there to take care of it and sort of live with it and move it on. As the actors develop and they'll find new things.
You know what?
You have to go.
I don't want to interrupt you, but got to watch our time a little bit. But, if it were me, I would just walk across the street to a pub and wait for the reviews to come in the next day.
And not watch it, right?
Watch it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a film about Strauss, a very old film, black and white film about Strauss the Waltz King, and a mistress of his leaves him, and she goes off on a boat on the Danube, of course, and she is wearing this amazing black coat, and it's in those days with sort of pin-curled hair, and she almost emanates light, and she's saying goodbye to him. The affair is over, and singing, of course, but she has this. She's smiling. And she's obviously, someone who can raise joy and bring joy to others by performance, but then a tear just rolls down her eye. And that's so, I find, that's the feeling, it's like, wow, we did it. We really did it. But I'm sad it's over, and we have to start all again.
Yeah. I understand.
I could just go on forever.
I have kind of maybe a little bit more of a personal question, but every successful creative person tries to be original and authentic. But there are times when we all have self-doubt. I know I have. How do you manage to get through those times, Leslie?
I was born with the gift of self-doubt. And honestly, I don't have that. Was it lack of self-esteem? I've never had. When people say, "Oh, you need lots of confidence," what is that? I know you just need to be able to find a way of having all those voices. Oh, you can't do that. You're not right to be in this room. Look at these amazing singers. Why are you here? We all have that. I think you just have to sort of push through that and have other voises in your head.
I don't. There's a few
let's just see how it goes.
There's a few more things that we want to ask you, and one that
I know we wanted to talk about with you, because when we first talked to you before we had our podcast, just to get to know each other, we talked about your experience with COVID-19.
Yes.
And how did that impact you in your life with all this going on?
Wow. Well, sort of 2 years ago, I think almost it is now, where I was at my studio in London working with my two assistants, and Melissa and Nate. And, things were getting bad. I was doing a production of Peter Grimes in Switzerland. That was cancelled. Then I was doing a show at the Young Vic in London. That was cancelled. And I said, look, guys, you're used to working remotely. Let's just leave the studio. And just be safe at home. I'm going to go over to my house in Northern Ireland and stay there for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I arrived here with my husband Richard, and we just both got sick straight away.
No,
we must have picked it up together, I think, probably.
Oh no.
And it just we both had the virus pretty badly. Richard ended up in hospital. I probably should have gone in hospital, but I was like a day behind him. And I have a very strong inner imaginary life, and I sort of persuaded myself I was okay. Mm-hmm. Our local vicar used to come and deliver food to me, and our neighbour Donovan, who's lovely, who's a photographer, used to come and look at the door and say, "Please call an ambulance. You don't look well." And I'd be, "Oh, I'm fine." Mm-hmm. But Richard came out of hospital. I sort of didn't necessarily get better, but it sort of didn't get any worse. And eventually, it was such a slow recovery like weeks and weeks and weeks. And I remember, not being able to breathe properly for a very long time, for almost a year. But in that, and I got to a point where I'd had enough of it. And a director who I absolutely love and I work with a lot is a director, Sir David Pountney, who was, when I was a student, was a director I absolutely worship. I could see absolutely everything he did in those things. He's amazing. He's still amazing now. And he rang me, and we're doing a show for La Scala. And he said, when you feel better, let's start thinking about it. And I just said, the piece Mephistopheles by Giotto is about God and the devil almost gambling on the fate of humanity. And I said, well, let's see how it goes. Let's start now. At least it'll give me something to think about.
Oh, sure.
Yes. I thought, I'm this sort of existentialist moment in my life where people are telling you this thing can seriously damage your health or even worse.
Right.
And I felt right on that knife edge of something that, and also people didn't quite understand it. So it was so gothic. But weirdly, I think in my sort of slightly altered state, I thought, let's do some work. I feel ready for this piece, and we just sort of, and actually what was very useful was something that occupied my mind, which wasn't just about being ill. As much as I could handle it, he'd sort of see me on Zoom, and obviously I'd probably look tired, and he'd sort of say, let's have a pause. And I actually, David is he's a very caring person beyond, just being a colleague. He's there for you when you need someone, and he's wonderful. And we just sort of started work like that, and it just sort of, the show just came out of those moments. I mean, I reckon I had pneumonia. That's what I've been told, actually. So, right. But thinking about a project just felt suddenly transported me and put me back into what I loved, and it made me think, actually, if I get through this, I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing. And in fact, I'm not saying advising being ill is something, but I took something from that time and put it in the work. It just happened to be the right piece at the right time.
Well, it actually
it
puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I mean, you all of a sudden you look at your own health and you're so excited about your career, and you've had so many successes, and you want to continue that, and then all of a sudden something that you never could possibly really anticipate impacts all of that energy. You made a comment about Handel.
Handel. Yes. When you listened to his music, was that very inspirational to you?
Handel is phenomenal. I mean, I've done a couple of his pieces, and I listen to them all the time. I love his music. I feel like it's it was written a long time ago, but I think the emotional line of it is absolutely current. And he writes explicitly about the human condition in such a truthful way. For me, it's mind blowing. It's therapy. His music. I have to be very honest about that. I find it's a way of looking at life that takes some of the sting out, the difficult things, and lets you look at them. Because even in the most difficult moment, there's a line, something beautiful that allows you to look at those difficult things. So he's a genius.
Hey, Leslie, I need a short answer to this. So I'll say it just a few words, 2, 3, 4, 5 words.
Yes.
What would be your advice to people that want to live or be more creative? You certainly have lived a creative life.
Oh my gosh.
But what would be your quick advice to them?
Do it, and do it now.
Perfect.
That is, agree.
Agree.
100% on that one.
Don't bring any of the questions into it, because let's not go to why you shouldn't. Just do it.
Okay, good. That's a good answer.
Absolutely no question.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question we ask all of our guests, and that is, if you could sit on a park bench and chat with anyone from the past, who would it be, Leslie?
Oh, wow. There were so many people, and I can only have one. Wow, who would it be? I feel like it's someone from the art world. I think someone like Leonardo da Vinci, because Leonardo in a bit. This is so obvious. Why have I not said my ultimate answer? It must be Shakespeare.
That would make the most sense.
Yes,
the
I could see that.
The Bard.
Oh my goodness!
From Stratford on the Avon. I would think you had a past life in Stratford on the Avon.
I could see that.
I reckon. After I've got through the tears, because the work it's sublime. But how could one person make all that work? And thank you. I just thank him. I just give him a massive hug. He'd probably want to get up and run off, but I think
no, I doubt it. I doubt that.
What an amazing, amazing gift Shakespeare is to the world. He's just the best ever.
I think you picked the perfect person.
You did.
And it's so relatable to your
what
career
you're doing
and your life.
Yes, entirely.
Well,
I'm ready to meet him now.
I bet you are.
Show me where that bench is.
I think you have energetically anyway, so I think you're there already, Leslie.
Well, Leslie, I have to say, both Inci and I are so glad we had the opportunity to chat with you, and I have been.
Wonderful.
I've been following your career, and I have to say, you are truly an amazingly creative talent. I don't say that lightly, but I've had the opportunity to see the things that you've created, and they are just magnificent.
I agree with you, Rod.
Magnificent.
And I have been absolutely awestruck at the beautiful, breathtaking work that you do, Leslie. And
thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And I want to encourage everyone. We have a show guest page on thoughtropodcast.com. And I know Leslie's going to share with us some of the stage production photos that he has.
Yes.
And please, everybody stop by and see his show guest page. It's on the top. It says show guest. You click on it. You will go there and you will see the most beautiful, breathtaking stage production ever. So check him out on social media, but definitely check out the website and you'll get all of his links there too.
Yeah, we'll have all of his links. So Leslie, thank you so much. You were just so informative and so inspiring.
Yes, thank you, Leslie.
My absolute pleasure. It's been so terrific. It's so lovely to meet you both.
It was so lovely to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad you tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed the thoughts and ideas we shared with you.
We post a new podcast every week, so remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you're enjoying our podcast, both Rod and I would really appreciate you buying us a cup of coffee. Just go to thoughtro.com, scroll down a bit, and you can find that link right on our website on the homepage.
It's really easy to do, by the way.
Yes, it is.
And all the money we receive goes to our production costs.
Yep.
And primarily because we want to keep our show commercial free, and we want to continue to bring you the best quality content with great guests.
That's right. Thank you for listening to Thought Row Podcast. So it's bye for now from my husband Rod and I.